will pay to see this.
No chains will ever hold that.
We'll give him more than chains. He's always been king of his world, but we'll teach him fear. We're millionaires, boys. I'll share it with all of you. Why, in a few months it'll be up in lights on Broadway. Kong, the eighth wonder of the world!
Hey there, Adrenalheads. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Mark.
And on today's show, we have a milestone event. This year, and in fact, it was about 1 month ago today, marked the 90th anniversary of the film we're watching today, and that is from 1933, King Kong. We're going to go ape today.
Yep. We're going bananas again, but in a different way, in a bigger way.
Mm-hmm. In a much more destructive way.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's have the synopsis, Mark.
All right. Well, the synopsis, if you've been sleeping for the past 90 years, unless you're Bruce Campbell in an Evil Dead movie, actress Ann Darrow, played by Fay Wray, and director Carl Denham, played by Robert Armstrong, traveled to the Indian Ocean to do location shoots for Denham's new jungle picture. Along the way, the actress meets and falls for rugged first mate John Driscoll, played by Bruce Cabot. Upon arriving at a mysterious island, Anne is taken hostage by natives who prepare her as a sacrifice to the enormous ape, Kong, who rules over their jungle. But when Anne is rescued and Kong is captured, the real trouble begins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no monkeying around here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so people we know from in the film. Okay, first we have Fay Wray as Ann Darrow, like we said. Active, her movies were active between 1923 and 1980. These movies include Dr. X, The Most Dangerous Game, The Mystery of the Wax Museum, It Happened in Hollywood, The Clairvoyant, and They Met in a Taxi. And she did a little bit of TV of some highlights from that are Playhouse 90, 77 Sunset Strip, Wagon Train, and Perry Mason. The last two I've seen a couple episodes of, but not necessarily with her. Mm-hmm. And I've only heard of the 4 TV shows I mentioned. I've not seen any of those movies I listed because they're just either not available or I've just haven't got around to watching them because there's a ton of movies from each of these stars.
I think I've watched The Clairvoyant and The Mystery of the Wax Museum in my time. The Most Dangerous Game is obvious, that I think we've all seen probably. If you're a historian of movies, like some of us are. I wouldn't say most. But she also did a documentary too in like 2004, 2005, I think.
Yeah, because she died in 2004, I want to say. I think that was what I had.
Yeah, she probably recorded in 2004. I think it came out in 2005, and it was Women in Hollywood or something.
Uh-huh. The original Scream Queen.
Yeah, literally. And on top of that, she was at the Academy Awards, as I recall, and they pointed her out.
Yeah, I remember that one because I think it was like one of the Billy Crystal years.
Yeah.
If my memory serves.
Yeah, and I remembered it completely because I was like, oh my God, she's out there in the audience. And they actually, they talked to her that night. And that is, Hollywood royalty, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, next up, Bruce Cabot as John Driscoll. He was active from 1931 to 1971. Apparently did a documentary in 1972. But movies that we may know him from, Show Them No Mercy, Robin Hood of El Dorado, Cat Ballou, Their Big Moment, Murder on the Blackboard, Hatari, not Atari, Hatari, H, McClintock, The War Wagon, Chisholm, Diamonds Are Forever. Now, was that a Bond movie?
Yes, that was
okay.
That was one with Connery.
Wow. TV listings, 77 Sunstrip, Bonanza, which is a commonplace for a lot of these actors at that time, and Daniel Boone. Awesome.
Yeah, because I remember I've seen, it's been a while, but I've seen Hatari, War Wagon, Chisholm, and I remember Diamonds Are Forever because that was fairly good.
Yeah, I remember Diamonds Are Forever because my father was a huge Bond fan.
Mhm.
I had to watch that. Probably Robin Hood of El Dorado as well at some point. I probably have vague recollection of it. Probably Murder on the Blackboard.
Okay, next up, we have Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham, who's done a lot of TV roles and was active between 1927 and 1964. Movies include The Falcon in San Francisco, The Navy Way, Gangbusters, My Favorite Spy, Little Big Shot, The Hellcat, and Son of Kong, the sequel to this film. Okay, TV shows include Lassie, again, another staple for actors in that time. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Perry Mason, Rawhide, and Have Gun Will Travel. Now, I've heard of Have Gun Will Travel. I've seen maybe an episode or two, and I think the character Paladin was the lead on that. Was it Paladin? Is that
I
right?
think so. I believe so.
Yeah, and Perry Mason I watched a lot of, but and again, that was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Showing my age. So.
We both grew up around the same time, and our family and parents are people who are older than us are influential into what we watched at that time because basically you only had one TV and you had to watch whatever they watched. So I know the feeling of having to see Rawhide, Perry Mason, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Have Gun Will Travel. Not so much. I don't really remember too much of that, but yeah. And his face and his voice is always, you just know who it is. I think it because regardless of this particular movie, you probably heard it during that time. And when you watch this movie later on as a kid or within that time, you're like, oh, that's that guy. That's literally how I recall this particular actor, Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham, which he played perfectly too. And we'll probably talk.
He played the sleaze very good on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then you have the last one, or do I?
I have the last one.
Okay,
that would be Frank Reicher as Captain Englehorn. Apparently, 231 credits, active from 1915 to 1951. Wow,
almost all movies. I think 230 of those are movies, by my reckoning.
Wow.
There's a lot to flip through. And I was like, I've heard of some of these movies, but never, and I've only seen Son of Kong maybe once. Oh, shit. I'm sorry. I jumped ahead of you.
No. It's okay.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Movies, like you stated, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which was actually remade recently with Ben Stiller. Son of Kong, which you just mentioned, which I have seen too as well. I'll talk about that later because I have something that's cool that I bought. Flight from Destiny, The Tiger Woman, which sounds so cool, but it's probably far from what the title is. The Shadow Returns, which is the Shadow series, which was probably from the radio broadcast turned to film.
Yeah, and I heard a few of those. They used to play them on the radio. Yeah, a while back. So just as kind of like here's some good retrospective, some fun times on those.
Yeah, my father actually, for one Christmas, I think I bought him. This was in the 90s, early 90s, mind you. They had the Shadow cassette series of the radio broadcast. So I bought him the collection. So he would listen to them in his car at times. So it's a nice gift.
Yeah, and now they're probably all on YouTube.
Oh, just like the Star Wars radio dramas and everything else that's out there.
There's a ton on YouTube. So.
Oh, there's a ton on YouTube, and that's the new media that we have now instead of radio, because radio is a dying medium as we go by. Unfortunately. But he was also in TV. Only one TV show, Your Showtime, apparently.
I've never seen.
Me neither.
Yeah, but I would love to see like if we know some older people, if we could like draw up the Venn diagram of the shows that fall within our respective circles. So to see what kind of like overlap there is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go under our general thoughts. So what do you, Mark? I think your thoughts and my thoughts may coincide here too.
They might, but well, to start off, I've loved this movie since I was a little kid. which is much like you too. You've probably seen this when you were very young. It's just a classic that I think everyone should really grow up with. I'm not just talking about people of our age and younger, but I'm talking about younger kids today. They should be brought this kind of visual information to them, but maybe a little bit censored. But yeah, times have changed with that. Willis O'Brien's effects work started the effects for creatures in film with this movie and inspired so many people. Without him, we wouldn't have such effects artists as Ray Harryhausen, which actually directly affected Ray Harryhausen.
Yes, he did.
Phil Tippett, Stan Winston, Tom Savini, and Greg Nicotero, just to name a few, as well as some motion actors out there that is now the digital realm, because that's literally how the effects companies have moved on. Now, they still integrate certain aspects of this within current effects, but we wouldn't have actors like Andy Serkis, who is the perfect motion capture actor to present that for digital effects. And it could also be used as reference for somebody who actually will do this kind of effect now. There's just an art to this, and it's a lost art that should be presented in a museum on a wing of its own so that we could see it all itself. Now, the Museum of the Moving Picture actually has certain things like this at their presence in Queens. I'm sure there are other museums out there that will do it. I'm looking forward to seeing that. A majority of the practical effects artists to this day regard this movie, and it's so influential, and I just love it. Like I said, it's a lost art. It should be glorified. I have too many fond memories as a 7 to 8 year old playing with like a rubber toy Kong that I had while watching the movie as a kid, and recreating my own little world of Kong with pillows, footstools, and like my own imagination. And this movie was the reason why I have a love for kaiju films and the love that I have for Godzilla films. If I wasn't doing Panels to Pixels podcast or this particular podcast, I'd be doing a kaiju podcast, because that's like one of the first two things that came into my mind when I thought about podcasting. But there's so much you could do with kaiju.
There's tons. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And yourself?
Yeah, for me, this is not my first stop motion movie. Those would be the Harryhausen films. Because those are like the like I mentioned before, the Saturday afternoon matinee creature feature films. Yeah, and we had this. Now this one I first saw. God, I'm thinking I was 8 or 9, and I remember that I was thinking it's like that's kind of terrifying to watch that, but with the effects, like with the ragdolling of some of the sailors, it's like, yeah, okay, those are ragdolls and everything, because they you got to think for the time, they did the best they could. but again, this is but definitely top 5 of like monster movies for me, and it's just one of those that again is groundbreaking and very influential, and I always just, no matter what, I can always just toss it on in the background and listen to it, or maybe watch it once or twice,
and recite its dialogue because you know it so well.
Yeah, well, I can't recite the Fay Ray scream as well as she could. So.
No, I don't think I could either. But it's one of those movies that we grew up with that you could just leave on. I always think of it as, I shouldn't use food as this, but comfort food. But this is comfort film.
Yeah,
to me, kind of like a comfort song to you. It's so familiar to you. You could always go back. You could smile about it. You remember all the good things you loved about it originally, and what you still do today. And it's one of those movies you could easily go back to. And I'm so glad that I actually watched this a few times within the past 2 weeks. So to me, I sent out a link to Jerry regarding this, because where I got the movie so I could, because obviously you guys know that I do screen grabs for pictures for the YouTube channel, and I get a picture and I don't want anything copyright slacked. but obviously this is public domain. It's a public domain site, and you could actually download the movie yourself for either MP4 or what have you. They have multiple. We'll put them in the show notes below. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're seeing it, or if you're on your computer, you can easily just click on the link and go there. There's a ton of movies that are there that are public domain. I kind of linked Jerry to it earlier today, and he was like, holy shirt balls, what is this? So there's a ton of stuff out there. This is one of them, just like George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which is public domain as well. But the thing is that this is classic. This is classic Hollywood. This is classic Universal too. So it shows that why King Kong is the king of Universal films and monsters at this point.
Yeah. And that just, it is, I am just so happy to be able to be talking about it on its anniversary, because if we're still doing this in 10 years, we're going to be talking about the 100th anniversary of the film.
Exactly. And the cool thing too about that, speaking of King Kong, now there have been things that are in film or even amusement parks, Universal, not theaters, but Universal Studios used to have a big King Kong exhibit when you go through the Universal tour.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I've actually been on that. It's on one. I think it might still be on the tram ride. I would have to. No, it's not on the tram ride anymore. Okay,
it's not. Well, the original was it burnt down.
You're right. Okay, yeah, because I remember I was in college in the early '90s, and we were on a school trip, and we went to Universal Studios, and we got to. Aside from experiencing the 9.0 earthquake, and they had the underground, like the underground subway station,
which was part of the tour. Everybody,
yeah, it's part of the tour. It's part of the tour, not the real one. But they also had Kong pulling on the cables and on the bridges and everything, and that was a heck of a thing in itself. So
yeah, and they did that in a Ben Savage movie. It was about the video games, and you could see the behind the scenes within it too, within that particular movie. But I was able to go see that when I finally was able to go to Universal with my sister, who was living out in California at that time. The fact that I got to that, I was grinning ear to ear, trying to take every picture known to man. And I looked like a typical tourist, but you got that banana breath, because they had that banana breath stink coming from that particular portion of, I would say, the ride, but it's the tour. And to see that, and it's so huge.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't have that to this day, but we have something that did from Peter Jackson's movie. That is something that is regular now within the Universal tour lots. And it's still good, but that's based upon Peter Jackson's version. This one was more of an iteration of either a combination of the 1933 and the 1970s version of King Kong that we got, which we'll talk about later too. We're not going to get too much involved, but we need to move on. We kind of digressed as we usually do, but Jerry, what's the next step? Where are we going?
Okay, we are going to go to our favorite scenes in the movie. So you want to take the first one?
Well, the first one obviously is going to be the introduction of Kong. That introduction of Kong to me, and when he takes Anne from the sacrificial temple or little section where she's tied off, posts, is so iconic. I just love that in the sense of her reaction, her scream, as we both can't replicate. But the fact that is just pure film history right there. That to me, I think when they brought up in the Academy Awards, they use that every once in a while. They'll do like retrospectives of like movies that were classics. That is one classic scene, because that pretty much started off a lot of like with the Academy Awards and within film. That like Wizard of Oz and everything is synonymous with that kind of iconic scene.
Yeah, and what I liked about it too is that there's always this I don't want to, it's not forced perspective, but the meshing of the shots, it's been done with other things before. but with stop motion animation and live action was a new thing. I think a new thing at this point, because but it's one of those things that you have to react to nothing.
They didn't actually have projection like Stanley Kubrick did, where he would film like 2001: A Space Odyssey, and he would have the screen projecting something, with a rear projection, and then have the actors react to it with the monolith that was there with the gorillas. I think that's the scene I'm thinking of. But they didn't have that at that time, so Fay Wray at that point had to react to nothing.
Because I'm thinking, and what was, I think, the biggest challenge on that was getting the timing right.
Yes.
Because you could sometimes, and like even with like the later Harryhausen movies, sometimes you can see a little bit of a lag or something ahead of it, but it's they were able to maybe take a couple frames out of the film at times.
But you also have to think that Willis O'Brien had to work that out too himself with every frame. Now, the question is, we have to go back to the documentary if there's going to be one that we're going to mention later on. But the fact is that they somebody had to reference that, whether it be the editor or Willis O'Brien himself, to get those shots correctly. Because from my understanding, Willis O'Brien was literally making those shots on his own from a screenplay, and then they would have to edit that in accordingly. And then the director would actually have to direct Fay Wray regarding that. Back then, filming was a talent and an art. We don't have this LED backdrop thing that Disney Plus has for The Mandalorian, where you have a whole scene behind you to react to, or other effects or images that are going to be blasted upon that screen that the effects supervisor has, whether they be skeletal or not.
Or like or a tennis ball on a stick kind of
exactly reaction. We no reference point. That's just a lost art unto itself. But it shows that this still holds up. And to do a film class, they will actually talk about this. Now, Jerry and I are not trying to give you guys a film class, but we're just trying to give you an idea how hard it is when it came to filming these things. That is why we love these kind of films. So that's why we love Ray Harryhausen, Willis O'Brien, all these stop motion things. Think about like when they did Army of Darkness, because that was in reference to like a Harryhausen film, because they had to do stop motion in that particular film. Think about the guy who had to edit that film too. And that time they were on a real big budget at the time, but a low budget in comparison to what they had at that time. But I kind of moved away, but let's get to yours.
Okay, mine is the chase of the meat-eating brontosaurus.
Another one of mine, but go ahead.
Because we're they're pursuing Kong after with I think him and about maybe a dozen sailors or so, more or less. I won't say about a dozen.
Yeah, but a lot of them kind of die off.
But and the majority of them are it's like a good maybe half of them are taken out by this brontosaurus, and they're on a raft chasing Kong because they can hear him splashing across the water. And they take a raft here, and the thing kind of comes up from underneath them, upends the raft, and starts like chomping on them. And this is where like the first instance of where you can see like the brontosaurus diving its head into the water, pulling out a rag doll.
Literally.
But for the time, again, it's as best they could do at the time.
But they were actually able to manipulate the ragdoll to move, just like with Fay Wray when Kong picks her up. They move, like Willis O'Brien would move the arms to show motion within those figures. And the funniest thing about this particular scene that you talk about, which I really do enjoy it myself, I thought it was a plesiosaur. And you think it's because plesiosaurs, if you look at them, they're pretty much like brontosauruses or brachiosaurs. Like if Daphne were here, she would kind of reference that based upon Jurassic Park. They had fins. But the fact that we do get it chasing after them, and then we go, okay, this is a brontosaurus. It's chasing them up the hill. And yeah, it goes on to the next one where it hunts them down.
Yeah. And the one guy ends up in the tree. And you can see that again, and this is reacting to nothing, where the guy's like kind of dodging the mouth of almost getting bit. Yeah. And it cuts back to the wide shot of him, of the clay figure in this case, not a rag doll, but the clay figure, and you can hear the screams, and you can see the brontosaurus is kind of shaking him back and forth, and then it goes silent. And it's like, okay, he's gone. So, and I was thinking when I saw that, I was like, that's a little intense.
There's a lot of things that are intense, and obviously at this point they didn't have the Motion Pictures Association authority involved for the ratings, because they didn't really have ratings at that time.
The movies were what all of like theaters movies were like. I know that it goes back to silent film, but the era of sound, like maybe 10 years tops at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 10 years by that point. Chaplin was like going through his hissy fits of, I just want to do silent films. I don't know when to do talkies. Now talkies were the rave. And this was one of them, but this is one of them that probably went on the wayside for the fact that everybody thought it's a fake creature. It's the first of its own sci-fi, as we call it, or fantasy.
Okay, so enough of the brontosaurus. So what we got? What do we got next?
Well, if we're going in consecutive order, you got to put yours next.
Yeah, we're going. Okay, then the spinny log, as I call him.
Yeah,
so, the spinny log over the chasm. So Kong travels over the log. They're still pursuing him. Goes across this big log across a chasm. The guys start chasing with Driscoll in the lead, and they hear. And this is when Kong perches Darrow in the tree to keep her. And while he goes and deals with these guys, goes back, and Driscoll's able to jump down and off the one side and get in that little alcove in the cliffside, while the other guys are stuck on the log. And Kong picks it up, starts turning it side to side, ditching the guys as they fall into the chasm on the tree.
Which it's cinematic history too, because you remember these iconic scenes like that. And they were able to be remade in certain ways. And another Kong film, too. We really didn't mention it, but Peter Jackson's version reminisced a lot of what happened within this particular film in comparison to its own film. So exactly. we got the same scenes, but just different visualization, CG work, done brilliantly for its time too. So my feeling is I always like to look at these things as snapshots in time for each individual film and just appreciate them individually. And each is a cinematic feat for each, hands down.
And one thing that kind of gets me on this is like, I've fallen, maybe 6 feet, and that hurts like hell. But I can't imagine, what, and there's no real scale to this. So I don't know, but I did like the effect of when the guys are screaming on the way down, they hit and it just goes silent. Oof. I don't know if you noticed that. Like when the guys are falling, the ragdoll hits in this case, but the guy, the body hits and then the scream just gets cut off because, he's out.
Yeah. Or they couldn't get Wilhelm at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Wilhelm wasn't around until the 40s.
Exactly. So they didn't have them then.
No Wilhelm scream then. So yeah. Yeah, but that was one thing. And then after he tosses a couple more guys off, he just takes the log and just pitches it over the edge. And you're taking the rest of them. And Denham's on the other side of this.
Yeah, hanging on by a thread.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those Denham's on one side, the other guy's on the other side. And yeah.
Yeah, and then we have and then Kong notices Driscoll in that little alcove and he tries to grab him. Yep. And he does the stabby motion with his knife.
It's a cool thing.
Okay, and then go ahead with the next one. I think you and I have the same one with the T-Rex. Is that right?
Pretty much. Yep. Yeah. The T-Rex scene. Honestly, I just love it. Just the battle. the battle itself, because Kong has Anne on a tree limb, or the tree itself just sitting there, like kind of like almost like a throne if you think about it, with her with the tree, and he winds up doing battle with this particular T-Rex, and he fights it to the death. And it's probably one of the biggest cinematic, pretty much monster scene within the film, where he battles something else. We do get the snake scene, which is awesome too, and they try to recreate that too in the 70s version, which is funny. But this one was a little bit more severe, how he snaps and breaks the jaw. Oh yeah. And
you hear the crunch.
You see crunch, and you see a dribble of it, and it's all black because it's black and white. So obviously, as a kid, or even back then, a moviegoer back in the 30s, are probably like, oh my god, that is so real. But it's not real, because we have no recollection of what these things look like, or whether or not they even bleed that way. But I thought it was amazing. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that one, well, I did like it because they had like I don't know if you noticed or caught it, but like when the T-Rex gets pushed the first time, it does its stance, and you can see the tail, like just this motion in the tail is very a very well animated, like you see
a heartbeat stopping slowly.
Yeah, like this, and the weight of the muscle in there. So
you got to give it to Willis O'Brien. He paid a lot of attention to animals and how they react in reality, and put it forth within these characters or animals that have been extinct for millions of years. So he was able to give us this world, this imagination, with what he was able to sculpt, and that's a testament to the effects creator and effects artist, and how they're presenting it to us within film. I just love it and enjoy it that way.
Yeah. Okay, my next one, I'm going to add one here.
Sure. The
capture of Kong. When they're running back, and then they kind of panic, close the doors real quick. Kong breaks through, throws the gas bomb at him, knocks him out, and then it's another thing about having that just having that effect as well. Yeah, because again, it's one of those things. It's like blending the live action, a special effects explosion of a gas bomb, with the miniature effects as well. Yes. So that's a nice little blend of those three.
Yeah. Because they would do a lot of force perspective when it comes to that. And I didn't really look highly into it as far as the behind the scenes when it comes to this. Were the sets that the actors were on for that wall scene, was that real? Did they do a fake facade? I didn't get into it.
Well, that wall portion was real, because it was reused from other sets, which we'll come to later.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like they only build what they need to, because there's you don't have to build the entire wall. You only need the entire piece of the wall
section where people are. Yeah,
and that the portion that's going to be on camera is
they could easily superimpose it onto a matte painting, and then have the stop motion animation in front of it at that point. Because it's like negative upon a negative when they do this at this point, everybody, just to give you an idea of how they do the filming. But like I said, there's going to be a link for you guys to see a documentary and how they talk about how they do all this stuff, and how Willis O'Brien is able to accomplish all this with his effects.
Yeah. Okay, and go on to your next one.
Well, the next one, I actually spoke a little bit about it. The snake scene with Kong and his cave lair. That is something that I'm not sure if it was one of the edited scenes that were in the particular movie, because over the years it got edited and then got reintroduced over the years. But I just love the fact that they actually recreated it in the movie Kong Skull Island. But instead of a snake, it was an octopus at this point. And each is individual and unique unto itself, for the fact that in this one, he just snaps and breaks. I think they did this in the 70s version, but in this one, it was more effective and more realistic to me. But even though it is stop motion and it doesn't look realistic, but the reaction of it to me was a little bit more reactionary with the gorilla or Kong than it was in the 70s version, because the 70s version, obviously, it was a guy in a suit. But with Kong Skull Island, it was CG, but they kind of give the emotions, but after the battle, he eats the octopus limb and slurps it down. That was very effective. But with this, it's like the fact that he snaps and he's playing with the head for like half a moment. And that is so true to something that like an animal that would do that has some sort of conscience, not a human, but something that would do that because it's just curiosity. And then I'm not saying Kong's curious George by any means, but but they are both monkeys.
Yes, exactly. Okay. My next one takes us to New York. So we have all the shenanigans around New York and ending at the top of the Empire State Building with, being buzzed and shot at by the biplanes.
Mm-hmm.
That entire run after he escapes his bonds in the theater, like starts attacking people, breaks through walls, does the train, destroys the subway train or the elevated train in this case, and then takes Anne from the hotel and then goes up the Empire State Building.
Yeah, well, that whole final scene is...
it is. I can't just pick one thing. It's got to be the whole thing. So
yeah, I know the feeling. It's one of those things. The one thing that I could actually devise out of that I really did enjoy, and I still enjoy to this day, Kong's escape from the theater and how people just run amok. Mm-hmm. It's like them running from the Blob at that point, like the Blob movie. We'll talk about that and reference that, yes. But the fact that, it's like pure like adrenaline just to get out of there because they're fearful for their lives. They got to run for their lives, everybody. I'm sorry, Daphne and Paige, but podcast guy, but I have to say it. Run for your lives. But it's so iconic. And everything that ensues afterwards, especially when, Kong goes into the city, he goes up a building, he crawls, he sees he's a peeping Tom, and he sees a woman, thinks it's Anne, winds up grabbing her, looking at it, and just dropping her. Things of that nature. If you guys are a fan of a video game Rampage, I used to do that all the time because you just pick them up or chew on them. But that's where they got that from too. So that was another thing that's a little Easter egg right there too for a video game. But yeah, I do agree. That whole finale scene, everything from the point that he leaves the theater, goes on his rampage, climbs up the Empire State Building. Then we have the whole visual effects of him swaying his arms as it was a point perspective shot of the plane coming towards him, and on the planes as he's holding them and smashing them down as well. That is cinema classic right there, and I just enjoy that. And then obviously him falling to his death.
Yeah,
and
bouncing a couple times.
Bouncy. Off the building, which is something that they had to do in stop motion at that point too. So
I think I think that looked like a kind of a ragdoll type thing with a distance shot.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Mm-hmm. But I'd have to go back to that documentary just to validate. But maybe you guys should too.
All right, so let's go to interesting facts and unknown facts about the movie. So, Mark, would you like to take the first one?
Sure. So the first one would be the movie grossed $90,000 its opening weekend, the biggest opening ever at that time. Shown at the Roxy and Radio City Music Hall, and the success of the film, if often credited with saving RKO Pictures from bankruptcy. Yeah,
now that one I don't know exactly, because I was trying to find the sources on that, but it's like this is where I've heard it on other other YouTube videos, and hopefully they're sourced okay.
Okay,
but I would believe it, because at this point the Depression was in full swing. So everybody's going to be hurting, even movies, even movie studios.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so it was shown at those two theaters. So, and I think those two theaters had a combined capacity of like 10,000 people, and they were sold out every single showing.
Amazing. Now, do we know what it cost to make the film? Do you remember that?
That I couldn't find a source on that.
Okay, no problem.
At least that's, and I've seen a couple different things. I'm not gonna like put out a number.
But I'm pretty sure it was less than what the cost of it probably was less than what they made on opening weekend.
Oh yeah,
back then, because honestly, the 30s, $90,000. Think about
is a lot.
How it works back then.
Yeah. Okay, so next one is, so we have several sequences were cut from the film, perhaps the most infamous of these being the spider pit sequence, which you and I both, I've seen before, and I sent you the link.
Yes.
In which giant spiders devour various members on Skull Island. When the scene played for an early test screenings, many of the audience members were horrified, screaming and leaving the theater. And director Marion Cooper, in this case, stated that he cut the sequence the next day, supposedly because it stopped the story rather than for its bad reception. So, and I can see why, now that these guys are going, we're going to see what happens to the guys in the pit and say, hey, what happened to Ann and Kong and Driscoll? What's going on there? So, saying even though the sequence was initially considered lost forever, director Peter Jackson was able to reconstruct it using traditional stop motion effects appearing on the 2005 DVD release. Yeah,
which I will include that link in our show notes so you guys can click on it. So if you're watching this on YouTube, on your Apple TV, your Roku or whatever, or even your computer, or if you're on your phone, just click the link and then you'll go to it.
Yeah, and that one, when they redid that movie, did that section in the 2005 release, I was not aware of the spider pit sequence at that point. In the 33 version.
I've only read about it. That was all I heard.
Yeah, and it was when Jackson did it, holy crap, I was just like, that is awful.
It's disturbing.
You got you get bit on the arm and like your arms being taken up because it's like one of those mouths with like the backwards facing teeth, so you just cannot get away.
Yep. So watch with caution, everybody.
Yes, if you haven't seen it yet. So.
Exactly.
Okay, so on to the next one.
The next one, the hand used to hold Ray was attached to a crane and hoisted about 10 feet above the floor, showing the close-ups while she was in his grasp. So when she struggled, the hand's grip loosened and she had to signal the director to get down. So her fear was real that you saw.
Yeah, and I've seen an interview, a archive interview with her talking about that, and said, that's real for me because that was scary.
Yeah, well, they didn't really have any harnesses back then or any safety gear. She was being held up high.
Or even, like a pit of foam blocks she could fall into.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. She could fall right on the concrete and it's 10 feet up. Now, some people would say, hey, I've fallen 10 feet up from the ground on something. But honestly, for a woman at that time, people have died from shorter falls with more injury than there are today. Because people don't know enough, hey, if I'm falling, I got to laugh to loosen myself. Nope, they don't do that. Back then, they were like, and they stiff as a board. They can really get themselves hurt.
Hurt even worse.
Yep.
Yeah, that's going to hurt even worse. Yeah. Okay, so next one is the ever-changing height of Kong.
Yeah.
In his first appearance in 1933, the colossal ape's height frequently changes throughout the course of the film. Originally, Cooper had envisioned Kong to be about 40 to 50 feet high, but animator Willis O'Brien stated that his crew scaled models so Kong would only appear 18 feet tall on Skull Island. And when Kong makes his move to the Big Apple, he's slightly beefed up to the size about 24 feet. However, this didn't stop the director from playing around with the set, manipulating the miniatures so that Kong would appear almost 60 feet tall in some scenes. Which, why? And going back to Jackson is that he kept that, Jackson was very consistent on the height of Kong.
Yes, he was very much a matter of continuity with Kong and his size and in comparison to the world around him. So it made sense with Jackson's in comparison to this and what we got. Obviously, this was a first, so they were still experimental in what they had to do.
Yeah. And I think maybe size continuity wasn't, paramount in their heads.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and take the next one.
Next one, Marion C. Cooper. It's Marion, right?
Yeah,
okay, Marion C. Cooper originally planned to include live Komodo dragons in the film to stand in for dinosaurs. Oh boy, that's a bad idea. According to some reports, Cooper even considered recruiting a few of the lizards to fight an actual gorilla over a miniature set before. Eventually resorting to stop-motion animals, partially due to safety concerns. Oh, thank goodness. A pair of these magnificent reptiles had previously been brought to New York before quickly perishing. A tragic tale which inspired much of Kong's emotional pathos. So, yeah, oddly enough, this is something that you could actually see. So if anybody actually does visit the Museum of Natural History in New York City, they do have a little section where they have a Komodo dragon site, like where stuffed Komodo dragons and things of that nature. And they'd say that they're not able to keep them in captivity.
Yeah, kind of like great white sharks are that same kind of difficulty.
Yes,
even though Monterey had done it for a while. So.
Exactly, but it's one of those things where just let nature be. That's if we were able to clone a dinosaur, leave it alone.
I would rather not do such things.
I would rather not do such things, but there are people out there that are looking to do that. There's some Australian billionaire or trillionaire that's looking to do that. Well, let's not talk about him. Let's move on to the movie.
Okay, go ahead and take the next one too, because I'm going to get the one after.
Okay. Next one would be the giant gates and the wall were used from Cecil B. DeMille's The King of Kings in 1927, and then used after in the Garden of Allah in 1936, and then in Gone with the Wind, where Scarlett and Rhett were leaving the burning Atlanta.
Yeah, so reuse. So.
Yeah. Well, that is Hollywood. If you go to Universal lots, you do see everything there that's been reused since, the 20s, 30s, 40s.
Because, like the town center that was Hill Valley and Back to the Future was many town squares for many TV shows that are shot on Universal lots.
Oh yeah.
In same park you can, and they kind of trick the shot so you're pointing in different directions so you don't see, that's that's that building from Back to the Future.
Yeah, or in Gremlins or a few other movies and things of that nature. Exactly. They actually did like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. There are other shots for Rome, and they actually used it in the History of the World, Part 1. Yeah, Part 1. Not the new one, on Hulu.
Yeah, that's Part 2 on Hulu, isn't it?
Yeah, which is pretty funny.
Yes. Okay, the next one here is King Kong was the first movie ever to be re-released. So, opting to capitalize on the film's astounding success, RKO re-released it in 1938, 1942, and 1952. And the scene of Kong's partial disrobement of Darrow was cut from the 1938 run, while the 52 version came with the added footage of the Empire State Building. So apparently they added some footage between those two. But in 1934, and this is the reason that we mentioned, the reason I'm mentioning it now is because we talked about it earlier about scenes being cut. 1934, rule called the Hays Code was implemented in Hollywood, giving guidelines on what could be shown on the screen. So this is like either some nudity or excessive violence, like dinosaurs chewing on guys hiding in trees.
Interesting.
And so in the 1938 re-release, other parts of the film were cut due to what was deemed excessive and was not seen in its entirety until the late 1960s. And the original negatives were lost to history until discovered in Philadelphia and re-released in its entirety, albeit with a lack in quality. Because until like it was worked on further in a restoration, you would see like the scenes go dark where the scenes were cut, and then go back to light where they the before and after the splice.
Yeah, but they would have to do a lot of digital coloring and lighting
and
to enhance
gray
it.
and the correction of that.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and now one thing I did remember is that I must have seen an older version because there's a scene of when Kong is attacking the village after Anne and Jack escape.
And a
Or
foot.
John, yeah. Well, not just the foot, but the Kong is chewing on one of the villagers and he's in his mouth.
Yes. Actually, the one that I gave you the link for when I downloaded that movie and I watched it on my Western Digital player, which has a USB thumb drive, that's why I use it, and that's how I was able to see it. That was actually color corrected and looked right. So the link that I give you guys in the show notes, you could download that and look at that on your computer or on your TV, depending on how you play it. Or put it to a thumb drive, play it. Honestly, it's public domain, so I don't make any money. Nobody makes money off this, but it's free to everybody to download. Yeah, you could see that. It's clear as day. He's just just gnawing on him. And that was like a life-size version of Kong's face, too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about the size of a car. Yeah, and there were the guys like inside of it, operating the levers and motors and stuff to make those motions, like his eyes going back and forth and everything. So.
Yep.
All right, so go ahead and take the next one.
Next one. King Kong was the first movie to have a completely original music score. Hailed as the quote-unquote the father of film composing, Austrian-born Max Steiner, who had previously worked on Broadway musicals, was permitted by Cooper to compose a full-length musical score at the director's personal expense. Prior to King Kong, cinematic musicians generally borrowed tracks from earlier recordings. Steiner's soundtracks includes character motifs and accompaniments designed to precisely mirror on-screen movement. This was the result of the studio wanting to trim costs by reusing music. But Cooper decided to pay out of his own pocket to fund the cost of the score, which turned out to be so much better. I do agree.
Yeah, because I noticed that, and reading that after, I go back to certain parts where, like, during the fight scenes, it's like when you have Kong, like, beating on something, there's musical punches with the beats of his fists.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of like, father of film composing. So think about it. Was Star Wars or Jaws or any of those movies inspired by that? John Williams inspired by this? So think about all those great composers from films. Hans Zimmer, John Williams, Bear McCreary, who knows? Everybody's inspired by film and film composition.
Yeah. Okay, next we have King Kong's chief effects artist, Willis O'Brien, had previously worked for Thomas Edison, who saw some of his earliest work. Edison commissioned O'Brien to produce a series of stop-motion films beginning in 1916.
Interesting.
So yeah, I want to go into further because I want to see how far back Willis O'Brien's, the
work that he has done.
Goes. Yeah, his depth of work. See how far back it goes and how much I can even find. I'm
curious if he was on the original Frankenstein that Thomas Edison did back in the day.
Might have been.
I don't know. They tried to do. Thomas Edison was credited as having the first version of Frankenstein on film.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I did not know that. So
it's interesting.
All right, so go ahead and take the next one.
The scene of King Kong attacking a train was added to prevent the film from taking up 13 reels. The superstitious Cooper, hearing this unlucky number, exclaimed, "No picture of mine is going out there in 13 reels. I'll shoot an extra sequence and bring it up to 14 if I have to." Ultimately, the final version was whittled down to 11 reels, but the added footage quickly became some of the picture's most memorable, which I do have to agree.
Yeah, because like the look on the conductor's face, when when he sees Kong's head pop up out of the train track.
Yep.
Yeah, and that one was always like, and I remember when they redid it for the 76 version. Kong, because she was wearing a silver dress in that at that part, and when he breaks open the top of it and sees a girl in a silver dress again, it's like sees her, sees that it's not her, and just like tosses her away.
Yep. That was taken from the apartment complex when he goes in with the hand, grabs her, and looks at her, and it just tosses it in the original 33 version. So
and I was like, oh,
it was a nice nod to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, go ahead and take the next one as well.
Kong's distinctive roar was created by editing lion and tiger growls. After recording an array of animal noises, which he slowed to half speed, sound effects artist Murray Spivak played a tiger roar backwards against a lion roar forward, which produced a sort of uncanny howl. Spivak himself provided the quote-unquote love grunts Kong used while trying to win over Anne.
Mm-hmm.
How excited was he?
Fay Ray is a beautiful woman.
Yeah. Look at her eye contact too on the ship when she's talking to the captain, or what's his name?
Driscoll.
Driscoll. Yeah.
Driscoll,
yeah.
Well, they kind of did fall for each other.
Yeah, but you could see the eye contact movement. Keep that note when you watch the movie. If you guys never really looked at the movie like 100%, and with a nice analytical mind.
Okay, next we have, and then this is kind of an aside, and mentioning Ray Harryhausen here. It's like Ray Harryhausen was inspired to do his life's work after seeing King Kong as a 13-year-old at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, and was able to meet him and show him some of the models he had made, and went to art school after that to improve his skills for drawing and sculpture, because it was one of those cases like I did see I remember seeing a interview with Ray Harryhausen about meeting Willis O'Brien.
Yeah.
Said that you need to work on this because your dinosaur legs look like sausages.
Yeah, I remember you saying that before.
Yeah. And at school, he was able to meet Ray Bradbury in his science fiction club. And Bradbury at that time was struggling to get his work published.
Yep. Yeah. So great minds coming together and interacting and creating great work throughout our sci-fi fantasy history.
Yeah.
They're able to interact and intertwine, and all three were able to make cinematic history, if not written history as well.
Yeah. And okay, let's have our final point here.
Final point. The film was reverse engineered around its iconic ending. The first image Marion C. Cooper had for the film was a giant ape on top of the world's tallest building, thwarting off planes. The ideas for the film came to him in a dream he had about a giant gorilla terrorizing New York City. He woke up and immediately wrote it down with the intention of using it as a basis for a feature. He and co-creator Edgar Wallace then worked backwards to build a film around this incredible spectacle. Now, therein lies the story of how King Kong came to be from a dream. It's amazing. To me, that is such like creative genius, because a lot of things come from dreams. A lot of people say it, like writers, film creators, film writers, special effects artists themselves, like painters, all of them get things from dreams. It's amazing what the mind can bring. And the fact that they were able to reverse engineer it into a full-fledged story from beginning to end. And the fact that we get, there's a love story in there and a Beauty and the Beast story, because we didn't really top on that at all, Jerry.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's like, what did Denham say at the very end? I always forget that quote.
Well, we have the quote.
Okay, well, let's go into quotes.
Yeah, let's go to quotes. Okay. First one is when the Denham. This is before he goes out and kind of gets Anne off the street and kind of hires her. After rescuing her from a shoplifting charge for shoplifting like an apple or something like that. Yeah. Denham, as he's leaving the ship, saying one of his backers is there and saying, "Listen, I'm going out to make the greatest picture in the world, something that nobody's ever seen or heard of. They'll have to think up a lot of new adjectives when I come back." And I was like, little did he know. Yeah, because originally he was wanting to get, he needed a woman for the story because it's like, the public wants love stories and I don't have a woman for the love story. So I'm going to go out and get one. And he's like, even if I have to marry her, I'll get one. Okay. The next one, I'll go ahead and take the next one. And this is when Denham shows the captain and and Driscoll the map where they're going.
Oh, you want me to read yours? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry. Do you have your own?
I have my own, but
Oh, go ahead. Oh, by all means, go ahead. I'm sorry.
They're going to be out of order, but it's okay, I guess.
Okay.
Do you want to do yours? Yours is more in order.
Yeah, mine's in order here. So.
Do it.
He says, okay, yeah, and so when they get to where they're going, the captain asks Denham's like, okay, now we reached this spot. Where are we going for here? Says, here's they talk about, shows them the map, talks a little bit about the history, says, there's a wall on this here. So that wall is as strong today as it was centuries ago. The natives keep it in good repair. They need it. Driscoll asks, why? Denham replies, there's something on the other side of it, something they fear. And Captain says, a hostile tribe. And Denham says, did you ever hear of Kong? And kind of goes into a little bit of that. There's far too much dialogue to go into here, but just the highlight of that. So.
You should just finish yours because mine are a little bit out of order. I don't have the same ones.
Okay. So when they're talking about going after Kong, says, what about Kong? And they say, Driscoll asks him, what about him? It's like, we came to get a moving picture and we found something worth more than all the moving pictures in the world. And if we could capture him alive.
Yeah.
Which they do.
Yeah. He saw dollar signs.
Yeah. Just his eyes turn to dollar signs.
Yeah.
And after they capture him, the captain said, Driscoll saying, we'll get chains and tie him up and take him to the ship with us and bring him back to New York. He says, Captain tells him, no chains will ever hold that. And Denham replies, we'll give him more than chains. He's always been the king of in his world, but we'll teach him fear. It's like, we're millionaires and I'll share it with all of you. Why, in a few months, it'll be up on lights on Broadway. Kong, the eighth wonder of the world. And goes to it does that like dissolve and it has the marquee of Kong, the eighth wonder of the world. And the next one is the last line of the movie, so I'm thinking I'll let you get that one.
No. You say
it. Okay, well, after Kong does his swan dive off the top of the building and bounces a couple times, lands in the street, Denham goes to look at him, and one of the officers are trying to hold the people back, and Denham introduces himself, and the officer says, well, Denham, the airplanes got him. And he says, oh, no, it wasn't the airplanes. It was beauty killed the beast. Which is probably, I did not check on that, but it's probably like one of the AFI's top 100 lines of movies throughout the years.
It is.
It is? Okay. And that does it for mine.
That does it for yours? All right, cool. I'm just going to delete out the ones that you've already said because that would leave me just a couple, but they're pretty cool. It would be this would be around the time of the theater. And Denham goes, listen, there are dozens of girls in this town tonight that are no more danger than they'll ever see with me. And then Driscoll goes, yeah, but they know what kind of danger. And that's regarding Anne with her being in front of Kong for that whole sequence at the theater. Yeah. The one this happens before because everybody's getting ready. And I think this is a kind of passing conversation that nobody really sees. But rewatching it today before we started recording, I caught this and I thought, oh, this is funny as hell. Okay. A woman goes, what kind of show is this? And the man goes, I heard it was with some sort of gorilla. And the woman goes, we have enough of those in the city. So I think that was kind of original for its time in that day, for the fact that how handsy guys could.
Kind of like just kind of a reference to that.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Does that do it for yours?
Yeah, that's it. That's all I had when it came to that.
Okay, so let's move on to ratings of this film. Mark.
All right. Well, we all know that, with ratings, I kind of did away with it, or we'll come back to it every time when me and Jerry do it. But with this one, I can't really give you a 10. But for a movie that is such a classic, so legacy, something that spawned a generation of special effects artists, sci-fi writers, Imagineers, all of them out there, I have to give this a 9.98. And it's such a great movie that I have to give it that. It's one of those movies that I look back, if I was on my deathbed, I would want to watch this one more time in my last 48 hours of my life. Just for the fact that it shows the struggle of anybody living on this earth. And that's what Kong does. It's being ripped away from your own world, falling in love, and then the world just striking back at you again. It's a rough world we live in. And
yes, it is.
So it's kind of a love and tragic story all in itself. I know I'm over dramatizing this, but honestly, that's how I feel. It's a story unto itself. It's like almost like a fairy tale, not a Grimm's fairy tale, because those are 10 times worse if you read those.
Yeah, you mean the actual ones, not the sanitized ones?
The actual ones, but all the sanitized ones are going to be actualized soon in film anyway. So what's the point?
Yeah, and for me, this is one of the rare times I will give a 10.
Oh,
because for me, this is like
the holy grail of
it's a holy grail for me on this one.
Yeah, I understand. That's why I give it 9.98.
Yeah, because it is just like I remember how and again, it's like now I'm like so desensitized to all this. It's like I was laughing at Paranormal Activity, kind of desensitized. But you and I and the rest of our group would probably laugh at that same thing as well.
I did recently too.
Yes.
When a little key insider clue: if you go to Dollar Tree and you buy a Blu-ray and they have a digital download code in it, you can still use it even if it's long after it's expired. So I had a Paranormal Activity one, so I bought it and I was like, okay, gave it to a friend and I kept the download code. So I watched it again. But the funny thing is that we could watch those, criticize them, and be desensitized to them. But I could look at this and value the effects that went involved in just a slight brush stroking of the hairs on Kong's back or body with every scene that Willis O'Brien had to do, from how the wind takes it. Those little things, those little brush strokes and those little nuances makes this like cinematic perfection, whereas those, it's a dime a dozen, or it's just, you have to work within the dialogue that you have itself or the story and the plot. But after you've gone through 5 sequels or 6, it's kind of redundant. But with this, it's cinematic history.
Yeah. Yeah, and nothing was really done with Kong until they had a Son of Kong, but I'm saying like with the actual original one until like the King Kong versus Godzilla in the 60s with Toho Studios doing that.
Yeah, Toho took up the mantle and then they did their own version of Kong as well.
Yeah. And this was I think the first time the guy in the suit Kong was fighting the guy in the suit Godzilla.
That's and I guess that's where we'll go into less popular films and something that we would call what?
Guilty pleasures.
All right, I'll start off since you already mentioned it. Godzilla versus Kong. King Kong. I am a true kaiju fan, as goofy as it is. I do love that film, regardless of it being a Kong in a suit. But I still think that's far better than the 70s version that we grew up with.
Yeah, so that was your guilty pleasure movie?
That is it, yeah.
Well, I have, for mine, I have a different kind of monster we're fighting this week.
Oh, okay.
I have, from 1963, The Day of the Triffids.
Yes. Actually, I had that on VHS for many, many a year, and I watched that. It's one of those go-to classic films. and I just love the effects that they had in it too. And it was so strange for its time, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, but a little bit of salt water saves the day. So.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Whoops! Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert. Sorry.
I'm sure they don't care, and they'll probably watch it anyway.
Yeah, but it does star Howard Keel.
Really?
Yeah. And I think that was after the after Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I can't remember. I forgot to look up the year for that one, but Bless His Beautiful Heart. If you remember the song, of course. Yeah.
A little bit, not much.
Okay. And on, I know we wanted to talk a little bit more about the remakes.
Yes. Let's go into that. There would be other notes that we could talk about. We could talk about a little other things of Kong. So let's talk about the remakes as you recommended or suggested. So we know that we have this version of King Kong, which is 1933.
Yeah, this is the OG.
The original. So we have another version after this, which is
1976.
Which has Jeff Bridges.
Charles Grodin, Jessica Lange.
Yep. Where they, throughout the filming of that particular movie, they kept stating how it wasn't a man in a suit, but majority of it was. Regardless of a huge ass gorilla crane that they used, and they only got it in there for several frames, apparently. That was a robotic one that they had built. I don't know how tall it was. I forgot. But that was the impetus of, and they only used a hand for Jessica Lange to fall into, and a few shots and everything else, or the gorilla face itself that they had to have motioned. Everything else was a man in suit. Like I stated, Godzilla versus Kong was a little bit better. At least they fessed up and said, yeah, we're Japanese, we do this. Godzilla is a man in suit. We got Haru Nakajima, so we're gonna put somebody else in a suit to play Kong. And it might have been Kenpachiro Satsuma, but those kaiju fans out there, just attack me. Go ahead, just send those bad emails and comments. Correct me. Let me know.
Yeah.
I haven't looked back into it. I do have 3 books, and obviously I did not read them until I can't remember half the stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But we had Peter Jackson's movie after that came out in 2005.
Yeah, I remember seeing the preview on that, being excited, then being slightly crestfallen at it.
Because it was more based after an idea of what a true gorilla looks like, which is a razorback gorilla, where we all grew up with the idea of an upright standing Kong that stood on 2 feet, was upright like a human, where we're not used to looking the gorillas in the mist Kong version going ape or bananas, as it were.
Yeah, but it was just I still liked it. I still thought it was good, but still it wasn't totally what I wanted. It was just something slightly just missing out of it.
But
couldn't really.
He romanticized the movie, which was great. There was that whole rapport between him and Naomi Watts. Watts was able to act with a CG based, which was Andy Serkis's best work ever.
Oh, yeah.
I thought, along with being Smeagol and Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy as well. Obviously, he was in that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it romanticized, gave more depth to the story. I saw another version of Jack Black that I never saw before because he actually did an astounding job in it. And on top of that, Peter Jackson's Weta Company became hugely popular and famous for companies to go to for their effects work. And it garnered an Academy Award or if not more. I didn't go into deep dives on this, obviously, everybody. But the thing is, the fact that it put Peter Jackson even more so on the map than just Lord of the Rings. And it gave us the fact that, these sci-fi fantasy films, they do have depth. They do have that kind of cinematic glory that a lot of drama, comedy, action, and suspense, everything that we cover here, literally, at sometimes. Because even Top Gun this past year has gotten an Oscar, even if it was just for what was audio effects or something. But the fact that they use Peter Jackson's movie as a teaching tool in NYU as well as in California. I'm forgetting the film college that everybody used to go to, whether it be Spielberg and everybody else that were out there. And
I can't remember.
I can't remember either. But they utilized that movie as a reference point, and they actually have a course in it, so that you would have to analyze the movie and explain it to your professor, and then come up with something very similar as far as a story and reference point.
Yeah, and that one I did like that. I did like some of the effects on it, but some were just like, I was thinking, well, can Jack Black really run that fast under dinosaurs as well, while carrying a movie camera?
I think then, not now. If you've seen him in Jumanji and compare it to this, big difference.
Oh, big difference.
Oh,
okay.
he gained a lot more weight, and he had a couple of kids after that movie. You have to think about it. That was 2000 when they filmed that. It was probably 2005 when it came out. They probably filmed that in 2003. We're 20 years later now. And I'm sure Jack Black would be like, no, won't do it again.
Yeah, but I did like Adrian Brody's Driscoll in this one.
Yes.
Yeah, he did really good on that one.
Yeah, he wasn't the big, burly kind of guy that you would think of Driscoll to be. Because even in the original 33 version, Driscoll was kind of like a tall man.
He was he's kind of lanky.
Lanky, and whereas with Adrian Brody is more skinnier. Not so, and but he had the gumption, the attitude, and the courage to get the girl and help the girl out. And that's really what brought that character more to life in that particular movie. Yeah, there's so many actors in there. Even Serkis was in there as a lackey. He didn't just play the ape. He also played one of the lackeys of Denim.
On the crew. Yeah.
Or if not, the ship's crew. I think it was the ship's crew.
Yeah, I think it was on the crew. Yeah. But I also do remember that one thing that I forgot to put in the notes here too, that I was thinking of, because I wanted, I was trying to cut out things from the notes rather than put in things, was that both Cooper and Peter Jackson did cameos as gunners on the planes.
Yes, they did.
Yes.
Hey, they had to get themselves in there somewhere. They have to do a Hitchcock thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, which I always thought, like, Hitchcock's little cameos were great, and then I think M. Night Shyamalan does a varying degree of that as well. So, but his movies, like, I think he's got more bad movies than Peter Jackson does, because watching Dead Alive, even though it's bad, it's still good. So.
Dead Alive. I still watch that on occasion because, oh my goodness.
Oh! Now that I say that, one thing that I noticed in the 2005 version of Jackson's film is that when they're going in the hold of the ship, if you keep your eye out,
is there a Creepshow thing?
No, there's a Sumatran rat monkey cage in the hold.
Really?
Yes. Take a look at that and then get back to me later.
That is cool. I forgot. I think somebody had mentioned that to me years ago, but wow. Yeah. So I said Creepshow right away. I thought the reference, like a cage or a crate.
Well, the crate would have been a good one too, but it's like, but that was, if they were on the lake rather than being in the on the ocean. So.
Very true.
Alrighty. So I think with that, we're gonna button it up.
Yeah. We don't have any feedback or anything like that.
You didn't put it out.
All right. So, well, you guys still have time for feedback. We could actually read that at a later time. But for you to submit your feedback, all you have to do is go to our Facebook page, which would be facebook.com/AdrenalineCinemaPodcast. I already put an image there, obviously the day of as we're recording, because I'm a little bit behind as usual. But you could always send the feedback and we'll read it on a later episode. Or I could easily just re-edit and pop it in, depending on what you guys want to do. So there you will find images of the topics that we're covering. Just leave a comment below that image and we'll read it. Or if you want, you could just send a regular texted email and you could send that to AdrenalineCinemaPodcast@gmail.com. So you could just write out your thoughts. We'll read them, like I said, on a later episode. Or if you want me to pop it in on this one, we'll do it. And we'll do a sidebar, re-edit, re-upload it. You could also, if you really want to get your voice heard, literally all you have to do is just record yourself on your phone, save it, and then just add it as an attachment to and send it to AdrenalineCinemaPodcast@gmail.com. So that's another point. So a lot of people do it. That's how Steve does it when he live Steves and sends it out to Podcastka to hear Adrenaline Cinema Podcast when he does do it. And he doesn't really do too much on Panels to Pixels podcast, but he will be back. That's my co-host from Panels to Pixels podcast. So, but other than that, you could catch us. You could send other feedback too, because we also have a Twitter, and that's at AdrenalinePodC. So I just created that just recently. So you could easily just send that to that as well. You'll probably see an image, just, and me saying, hey, we're covering this. As well as Instagram, that's at AdrenalineCinemaPodcast. Now, the best way to help us out with the podcast would be if there's a review in your podcast player of choice, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, what have you, please do so. Apple Podcasts and Spotify are the best to do so. And if you could give us a 5-star rating, be really greatly appreciated. Just tell us exactly how you feel, or you could do that with an email. I already said you could just submit your feedback. We don't get really much, but I do appreciate them, and I appreciate you guys listening. We also are on YouTube, so you could check out the YouTube page. All you have to do is look for Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. Literally, it's the podcast, but on YouTube. I put an image, and I put the Adrenaline Cinema logo. So, image of the film from a scene that I took from the actual movie itself, and then put the Adrenaline Cinema logo on there. Boom. And then you could listen to it that way, because that's a great way to listen to it as well. If we do an interview, obviously it will be found on YouTube. You could get a visual. You could see my ugly mug, or the nice,
and mine too,
or the nice person. Eventually, I will be moving on to StreamYard. I'm granting probably another 3 to 5 months until I get that situated. I'm still learning, so I will get that down and get an actual account and get that set up so that we could actually do something visually for you. So you're just not audio stimulated; you get visually stimulated. But also that also helps with anybody that we interview. So, there's so many ways to help out. I do not have a Patreon. Do not look really to doing that anytime soon. But that's in my mind and my thought. But this is a labor of love and just a hobby. And I just love doing this. So if you guys, a little bit of support helps. And that would be just from submitting your feedback, liking the posts, getting other people's to listen, and liking everything that's on YouTube. That'd be appreciated, as well as the reviews. But other than that, that's where it's at. But Jerry, you could be found on another podcast.
Well, sometimes I'm on Watched It in the 80s with Damien.
Yep.
And Alex and I did the 1923 after show for the first season.
Yeah.
And we did that one, and I haven't done anything with Damien in a while. I think I think he's taking a short break. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
But we've got some stuff in the queue that we want to on our list that we want to do, and then we're gonna do on this podcast. We have many previous podcasts here, mm-hmm. but we're gonna try and do what is it? Big Trouble in Little China.
Correct.
As well, we're trying to get Jamie on here. Yep. With that.
Yeah, that's the next on the list that I plan to do. So we already covered John Wick Chapter 3, and that's out already. This is the next up. After this will be John Wick Chapter 4 because it's fresh in the theaters. So Kat and I are not taking over 2 years to get that one done. We're taking 2 weeks. So that will be up. So I guarantee you it's not going to take 2 years. So hopefully within that time, Jamie, Jerry, and I could actually sit down and do Big Trouble in Little China for this. So that'll be on the docket to do, and I'm pretty sure there
was another one we had kind of thought about. Which one was that one?
I cannot recall, but I'm sure if I go through my list, I'll find it.
Yeah, I think it was another.
It was a Carpenter film.
No, that was Big Trouble in Little China.
No, it wasn't a Carpenter film. Carpenter adjacent.
Oh, you're right. Carpenter adjacent. Okay, right.
It's the prequel to The Thing. So it was The Thing with Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Thank you.
So we plan to do
That's
that.
the one.
Yeah, we plan to do that. So that's another movie that we plan to do in the near future. So if you guys do have any thoughts about those movies and you're listening to this and you already have your thoughts prepared, you can just send them out.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but where else can listeners hear me? Obviously, you could hear me here right on Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. You could also hear me on Panels to Pixels podcast. Currently, Steve is still out. I'm hoping to get him back in because he's been taking a little bit of a vacation. He had some issues, health issues, but he's remedied a lot. He's feeling a lot better, thankfully. And kudos to Steve. Glad he's getting better and he's on the mend. We look forward to doing Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Plan on covering Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and hopefully Secret Invasion when that comes out. And that should be coming out within the near couple of months. But we'll come up with some other things too to do. If not with me and Rob, it'd probably be me and Rob and Steve, or me and Steve. Just depends. Or whoever else wants to jump on that time. Unless you guys have thoughts too, because all you have to do is go to Panels to Pixels podcast.com or just write us at Panels to Pixels podcast. No, it's Panels to Pixels 1 at gmail.com. If you write us at Panels to Pixels 1 at gmail.com and tell us what you want us to cover, that would be great, because I'm sure there's other films and shows that we haven't covered. But we've been doing the regular, as always, Umbrella Academy, The Boys, when The Boys comes back. Currently, they're filming. But we would do other films that are out there that we haven't covered. So you tell us what you want to hear, and we will cover it. So Panels to Pixels podcast. That also could be found on Hardcore Entertainment Network. You could also hear me on Fantasy Picks Movie Edition as well. So Rob kind of ropes me in as like the third wheel or fifth wheel or fourth wheel, depending on how many people are on there. But I get on there and I act like I try to be the jokester on a joke, but
yeah, until I get there, of course.
Yeah, of course. And then you can check me out there. Sometimes you could hear me on podcast. It depends on whatever podcast that they're doing, or even live reactions. Because I did a couple for I did one for The Last of Us, or The Cast of Us, and then I did one for Yellow Jackets. So
yeah, and that's going. And that just started its second season.
Yep, it just started.
I really like. So,
yeah, that's a good suggestion too. So obviously we mentioned Podcastica. You could hear Jerry on the Podcastica network with Alex when they did 1923. And you could hear me on Sandman Cast, which is on hiatus until Sandman returns on Netflix for Sandman Season 2. So Jamie Dimmick and I, who Jerry had mentioned before, is going to be on for Big Trouble in Little China. We're going to do that. She was on that as well. So she was kind of the leader on that point. I was just a guy there and joking around. Yeah. But those are places that you could hear us, and that's about it. Yep. But just like Kong, just don't go ape over this episode and throw bananas at people.
Yeah. I was glad to be here again today. It's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah, and we will be doing this again. So, with that, that is our coverage for King Kong 1933. And happy 90th anniversary. I should say birthday, but it is an anniversary to King Kong. And that was Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jerry.
And we'll talk to you guys later.